Welcome to So to Speak. My name is Evan Mead.
I'm Lyle Groniger.
And we've got Josh Weinberg here with us.
Hello,
Hey,
Josh.
everybody.
Now, when you're in school and learn new things, do you guys remember back in the 90s or early 2000s when the teachers would take us on down to the computer lab and we would get the chance to play any educational game we wanted?
They were all on DOS.
Yeah, they were.
Provided it was actually installed on the computer.
Depending on which school district you went to. Educational games.
Yeah.
So, where the hell do we begin? Well, first off, what's one of the first educational games on a computer you ever remember playing? I can go first and say what mine was.
Okay.
Alright.
The first educational game I ever played on a computer was actually an art program called KidPix, and it was like a very old school graphics type of way to teach kids how to do art. It was kind of like, what you use in the skills you learn in KidPix could theoretically be applied to stuff like Microsoft Paint or even Photoshop. So
I'm still using those today.
yeah,
Thumbnail maker.
I just remember KidPix being really artsy in teaching kids how to, make art on the computer. So you got to respect him for that.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Now, in Evan and our school, I especially remember a specific version of KidPix being really popular. I think in the middle grades, that was KidPix Deluxe 3.
That's the one I used.
Yeah.
I think aspects of that have held up today. There's like certain memes where when you undo something, that phrase says, "Oh no, I made a boo-boo, yeah."
Oh, yeah.
There was like that little bit of sense of humor, and especially with KidPix, you could do all kinds of crazy things like take these somewhat lifelike, I guess for an 11 or 12-year-old, they seem lifelike, like pictures of like bugs or jewels or candy, and just click and hold your mouse, and it would just generate them all along wherever you have dragged your mouse.
Yep.
That was my first educational game. I guess those games that came in the cereal boxes weren't necessarily educational, like Tonka Search and Rescue and all that. That was just activity stuff. So, I guess my first experience was probably Math Circus, I think. Yeah, it was Math Circus.
Now, I gotta
talk about that.
Question. Was it Math Circus Act or Math Circus, just Math Circus? Because there was an Act 1 and an Act 2. And
I think they were separated by acts.
I think it was Act 2, because I know there was definitely, in a lot of the computers in early grades, it was Act 2.
Well, I had Act 1 and Act 2 on my school computers.
Yeah.
So they're different activities. Should I go into them, or should we wait until we go further down the list? Or
we're just talking about what our first exposure was to an educational game.
Okay, so that was my first exposure to the educational game.
Yeah.
And I hate math, so I don't know why I clicked that one first.
But, man, on the topic of Math Circus, that is, in fact, a game that looks like it was made for DOS. Because even if you go back to, see video footage of that series, it is clearly DOS quality. But it's got that nice MIDI circus theme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brings me back every time. What was your first educational game, Josh?
See, mine's kind of a toss-up because I don't know if a PC game solely focused on teaching you to read is considered educational or not.
I would say it is.
Okay, so in that case, the first computer game I distinctly remember playing is Rita Rabbit's Interactive Reading Journey.
Oh, yeah.
It was sort of part of what got me into, as a kid, some of these Rita Rabbit franchise stuff developed by the Learning Company, which would later include the Clue Finder series for a time. But as like a 3 or 4-year-old, putting that in, that really was what helped me to develop, my reading skills. And the fact it also came with little booklets of all the stories in the game that you would go through, it was sort of a neat way to practice that stuff outside of the game as well.
Yeah.
Supplemental materials and all that.
Yeah. Nice. That's cool.
So I see you have a full list here of games that you experienced.
Yes, I did the homework.
Yes, you did.
No, pun intended.
Oh. It's like
I don't miss having to do homework.
Yeah.
Now I just work.
Yeah. Homework becomes work.
At home.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Oh, God, we're still in this.
Oh, jeez. So, we have a list. Take her away. What you start off with the Raider Rabbit series.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
true.
recall those.
I do.
What did you do?
So, Reader Rabbit is mostly focused on teaching kids how to read, things with grammar, writing, creative writing, stuff like that. Although there were various math spin-offs and probably titles aimed at younger kids. Like I said, my main experience was with in the first interactive reading journey, and I think one of the Math Rabbit iterations, it might have been for ages 6 to 9, because I remember in third grade playing that one a bit. But I also remember, I believe, I think it was Rita Rabbit 3, where the character of Rita Rabbit is working at a newspaper, and you have to help him come up with stories by doing all these various activities. But that was sort of, along with various other titles, that was what helped propel the Learning Company to be a really key player in children's software, along with stuff like Treasure Mountain, Galaxy Cove, what have you, and a couple of other things.
I don't recall that one so much, but I've heard of it. Evan, have you played it?
Not this particular Reader Rabbit game, but I have. I only played one Reader Rabbit game in my life, and that was actually one that my dad got me on CD-ROM to play outside of school. So fun, right? But the point, I played Reader Rabbit second grade. Ironically, though, Reader Rabbit wasn't really the main playable character. You play as this guy named Sam the Lion, and you have to go through a castle that Reader Rabbit has apparently gone to. It's kind of like, you know how Luigi's Mansion, the whole premise is Luigi goes into a mansion to find Mario? That's essentially what you're doing.
That's Mario is missing.
That's what I forgot to mention.
Which
there
is
are
also...
characters other than Reader Rabbit in this.
Okay. I feel Mario's missing. Yes, no, Mario's missing.
Luigi's Mansion, you fight ghosts.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Mario teaches typing.
No, are there some like educational Nintendo
Mario's
games?
Time Machine. Yeah, there were a couple. The Angry Video Game Nerd covered them.
All right.
They're really.
Technically, Mario Paint is somewhat educational.
Yeah, kind of.
By the slimmest of margins.
Yeah. It's an activity center, yeah. But I've never played any of those games. They look kind of dumb. So. No.
Now, the next two on the list, I do kind of want to skip over because I really would like to close with those.
Okay, sure.
So, next one here, Lyle, I think all three of us know about this, but Lyle in particular, there was a company, Edmark, that had this, what's called an early learning house series of computer games, teaching about math, science, telling time, history, things like that. And so, some of the first instances that people would have heard of are some gems by the names of Millie's Math House, Sammy's Science House, and Bailey's Book House.
I love these frickin' games in grade school.
I remember. I remember Sammy's Science House, Millie's Math House. I remember those quite well. I just can't remember Bailey's Book House that much.
I didn't play that.
That was a little bit of a lesser known one.
Yeah.
It's the music, the activities, the Science House especially. I remember the weather machine one, and there was one where you had to recycle different materials.
The trash can one. It's like, great job, neat.
Do you know what? No, I remember.
They'll clap their hands when you win. It also had the earliest example of us using an editing machine.
Yes!
In movie theater.
Look out, Hollywood! Here we come.
Yeah. Look, you've made a movie.
Yeah.
It was just like,
who knew how? If they, you know what? If they ever do like, our biopic of like who we were as filmmakers, like they'll show
start off in grade 2,
Pleasantville Public School, 1997, where I'm like 5 years, I'm like 6 years old, and I'm on this game, Millie's Sammy's Science House, playing the video editing game, and then flash cut to a few decades later when I'm in my 20s editing, so to speak, like yeah.
Here's the proper timeline. You have Sammy's Science House, that movie editor, to Lego Movie Maker, to Windows Movie Maker, to Final Cut, to Adobe Premiere.
Yeah, that's the transition, all right. I liked. Millie's Madhouse, I didn't play too much. I think the only game I remember is the one where we put jelly beans in the cookie.
I was gonna say, I remember the cookies, the opening theme. I think there was some sort of cash register,
There was,
and
yeah.
I think there was the one with the shoe sizes.
Yeah. Hi, I'm little. Shoes, please.
Oh, I remember those. Like,
Ma'am, this is a Wendy's.
yeah, like, what I used to do is I used to dick around with the shoe game where I would put little in shoes that were too big, and then he would be like the
He'd
big
get eaten
shoes.
by the shoe.
No, the big shoes would like freaking swallow him. It was actually quite cute.
Yeah.
And then if I would ever want to be a dick, I'd put big and small shoes, and he would like give me this like "Ugh" look.
Yeah. No, those games were amusing, dude. They were like, you could always click on things and they'd always move around and interact. Kind of like the Jumpstart games or something. But yeah, the Edmark games were definitely the ones I came along with the most in terms of educational games. That and Math Circus, but we're going to talk about it in a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of, we did talk about Kid Pix Deluxe 3 kind of already, but I did want to mention the opening jingle when you actually start, like the theme when you start up the game, like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Kid Pix, come on and play with Kid Pix. Like it was unnecessarily catchy.
It sounds
but
like the Zoom theme.
More catchy than it should have any right to be.
Yeah, it's like, come on and zoom, come on and zoom, come on and zoom, zoom,
Don't
zoom.
tempt me with more episode ideas. I will make one about that.
Oh yes, I love Zoom.
The Zoomiverse coming soon.
So to speak, Zoom or TVO Kids or whatever. PBS.
Yes.
Anyways.
So technically, we do have Math Circus Act 2 next on here.
Yeah. Yeah. What games do you guys remember playing most with Math Circus?
I remember the guy who was Captain Blunthead, the human cannonball.
Oh yeah,
having to line up the cannon.
That was hard. You know what else was hard? The trapeze one where you have to line up the line and the parabola so that she doesn't fall to her death. Yeah. That just stressed me out too much, dude. That shit was more stressful than Uncut Gems.
Oh wow.
My favorite one was, it wasn't even a math game. You were a little boy. You had to run down a line, and there was a witch and a beast, and you had to save a magician. And you had to press the arrow at the right time. And if you didn't move at the right time, the beast would get you. And it always scared the shit out of me because the beast was like and the witch, if you got too close, she would like kill you with the wand. But it wasn't even like a spell or anything. She just touched you and you die. And you
I remember that. Jeez.
Yeah, and there was like a dragon too. Like it wasn't even a math game. I think it was just like hand-eye coordination. But it was the only one I liked because I didn't have to do math.
Yeah.
I was a lazy student.
Yeah. Now, Josh, this might be a little off the timeline, but I'm 90% sure you're going to talk about this. But there is a game I remember where this was in 4th grade. This was pretty much like what we played if ever went to the computer lab. There was some kind of math game where it was like a bowling game where you played as this gorilla. And
I've got that. We'll get to it.
Okay, yeah, no.
It's on there.
That's
me.
Yeah, no, that was a good one. Yeah.
You guys remember that? You remember the game where there's those 4 clowns and they all have to stand up, but you keep hitting each other with the ladders or spraying each other with the fire hose? I could never solve that. It was like a Rubik's Cube.
Vaguely.
When I was
don't think I remember this.
Okay, maybe that was Act 1.
It sounds vaguely familiar.
Maybe you're more. Yeah, maybe that's. You guys are more accustomed to Act 2, and I'm more accustomed to Act 1.
Yeah.
Well, because the thing is, Act 1 is the one that's actually somewhat widely available to find online, whereas Act 2 seems like it's vaporware. I can't find anything on it.
Oh, nuts.
Yeah.
Not Act 2. I think there's like 6 of them or something, right?
I think 5, but it seems like with some of them, it kind of went the way of, Ringling, Barnum, Brothers, and Bailey's, whatever that long circus title was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
But on a happier note, I kind of classify this next series as educational because it was actual books that existed, but just in computer form, and that is the Living Books series.
I remember these.
Yeah.
Always fun going to the library and using their computers and checking some of these out.
Yeah, why get a book when you can read it on a computer? Very ahead of its time, actually.
Yes.
The one I remember the most was the little critter ones. That introduced me to that series. Those were nice.
Oh, I love those. The little critter ones. I also really like the one of Stella Luna because I think I really just came to enjoy Janelle Cannon's sort of sense of illustration.
Oh, she was the author. I remember Stella Luna. I also remember Verdi.
Verity, yes, about the snake. That is a good one too.
That was a good
Let's
one.
see. So, because the idea with living books would be these really nicely animated versions of the pictures of the book, where you could click around, sort of like a kid's introduction to point and click adventures. Which maybe that might be a separate thing. Because while point and click adventure games are excellent computer games, I don't know if I would strictly qualify them as educational, unless they
Not
are
all of
mostly
them.
aimed at kids. But even then, that's a thin line. However, with these, you could click around the screen and you could have some dialogue moments happen, some funny Easter eggs might happen, but you have the option of either clicking through at your own pace or basically letting a narrator read it to you.
Mm-hmm. There's also a Dr. Seuss one too, Cat in the Hat.
Oh yes, Berenstain Bears. There are some
Oh,
Arthur
right,
ones.
Yeah, there's a wide
Jack
selection.
Prelutsky poetry book, The New Kid on the Block. So I'm like, oh, so that's Arthur knew of Jack Prelutsky.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when that was one of the to avoid turning this into an Arthur episode. That was one of the best episodes he guest starred in.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Now, well, there were a lot of living books. These were published by Broderbund, which is a software company that has a few entries on the list.
Why is this? Why am I having a little trouble coming back to this living books? It's not really clicking in my memory.
Well, I'll show you some later.
Like as soon as you hear the you know you're in for a good time.
I'm gonna look this up on my phone. Just
Well, speaking of looking things up on your phone, this series from the '90s has a modern twist. In the early 2010s, a lot of this company Wonderful Inc. that got the rights to a lot of the Living Books titles and actually re-released them on iOS devices.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, so for like $5 a pop, you can get some of these. And I also really like things like The Tortoise and the Hare, Harry and the Haunted House, Ruff's Bone.
Looks like living books shall continue to live on forever.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would the actual viewer app is free, but every other book is $5 each. So just keep that in mind. And if you really do want to find any of the older Living Books titles, they're very easy to find online. But
yeah, you can find them
especially if you have young kids, this was a really great way to get them into reading.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, now it's coming back to me. I actually remember the living book for Arthur's Teacher Trouble, where he meets Mr. Rapper, and that was a good one. Yeah.
If memory recalls, he does not do the AARDVARK dance.
Yeah. Damn it. What a letdown. What's next on the list?
Well, I hope you have your fingers warmed up and your words per minute skills measured. We're talking about typing games.
Woo-hoo! Fun.
Specifically, stuff like Mavis Beacon teaches typing and All the Right Type.
All the Right Type. That was a big one. Yeah, I when I was a little older, my mom got me a game at home called Typing Pal Junior. That was a good one.
Well, I know Mavis Beacon was sort of seen as like the pinnacle of games where you would have all these different activities that were focused on getting you consistent with making good keystrokes and getting your words per minute skills up. Because I guess at that time in the '80s when this series started, being a receptionist, you needed to be able to type things really quickly. So this was sort of meant to optimize that. All the Right Type, I think, had more, at least from what I recall, was one of the first times that it had more activities focused on actually understanding the position of the keyboard, the orientation, I should say.
Right.
Was it the game that popularized Quick Ask Zoe?
I can't say I've heard of that.
I remember the Quick Ask Zoe. What stops X-rays? Even dogs can't. Red fish vanish, then grow bigger. Yaks hear noises under Jack's mattress. I keep commas over long periods. Peanuts. It's just the layout of the keyboard right in front of you.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just what my school did. I guess that's just what my school did. I was just wondering where that came from.
Yeah. I remember our teachers. I remember our teachers were saying, "You kids are lucky to have these games." Back when we learned to type, they sat us down in front of typewriters and said, "Type."
fun. Didn't
Yeah.
have.
And I definitely would recommend Lazy Game Reviews video on the Mavis Beacon series. It gets into a little bit more detail on the series as a whole. Because I've only done a little bit of these particular games. I'm not super versed in a lot of it, especially because after a certain point where your computer skills get good enough, you kind of plateau and you don't really feel the need to improve too much.
Yeah.
Especially now, but we're going from typing to a little bit of detective work.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
The
So
Batman game?
no, not that.
Oh.
But we are going back to Broderbund, as they are responsible for the line of perhaps one of the games that perhaps shows the world's greatest thief in action in the Carmen Sandiego series.
I never played these games, but they look so interesting to me.
They are. I mean, there's various different ones. It started in 1985 with Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, and there was a few different ones, like USA, Europe, Time, America's Past, Space. There have been more modern Carmen Sandiego games, but the gist of it is you are part of the Acme Net. You're basically a task force trying to track down Carmen and her gang's whereabouts using various clues. And it's kind of interesting because you almost don't want to catch Carmen. She just seems like such a mysterious, captivating figure because she always manages to escape your grasp.
Dagnabbit.
Yeah, Acme Detective Agency. Yeah, so Carmen basically works with a bunch of people from the Vile organization. So you have to stop them. And although it has been rebooted in '96, this is more of an aside. I think a lot more people were aware of the video game through a little PBS game show from the early '90s of the same name.
Oh yes.
Nice.
Yeah,
and that badass theme song that comes with it.
Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? I know that. That's all
Do
I
it,
know. Rockapella.
And while there were actually, when Netflix did their animated Carmen Sandiego series a few years ago, there were some browser-based games in this particular sort of series, I say, in quotes. I don't know if it's canon or not, but I definitely recommend that people at least check out the earlier Carmen Sandiego titles because they do get pretty challenging, and it's fun. There's different stuff about geography and history with Where in America's Past, so you get a lot of skills out of it.
Oh, sure. I mean, it wouldn't be educational if you didn't get anything out of it, so it's good to have value.
It's a good gateway to go from Carmen Sandiego to like L.A. Noire or something. Hey, now there's an idea.
A crossover. Broderbund meet Rockstar.
Well, I don't think Broderbund exists anymore, but I wonder whoever would. I think technically Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, which is it's a book publisher, but I think they might also have the rights to that particular thing. Yeah, they now own the rights to it. So if you're listening, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, maybe if there's ever an LA Noire 2, which I doubt that will happen, but we could have had a really nice DLC mission.
Yeah.
Maybe Telltale will get on that. Telltale Games.
Well, more like LCG, they own the rights to most of the Telltale point and clicks, but that could be interesting.
There you go.
Yeah.
What's next on the list?
Well, we're gonna go from. Remember, someone made the joke about putting the little person in the big shoes for
Yeah, that was
Millie's
me.
Math House. Well, we're gonna go to something a little more humongous.
Oh.
With Humongous Entertainment and their line of educational games, a lot of which, for kids, especially with adventure games, there are some classics in here. You've got the Putt Putt series, the Freddy Fish series, the Pajama Sam series, and the Spy Fox series, not to mention some memeable gems like Fatty Bear's Birthday Surprise, and there's also the Big Thinkers duology, the Junior Field Trip series, and even some licensed stuff in the Blue's Clues franchise, but mostly I'm focusing on the actual series people know them for, stuff like Putt Putt, Freddy Fish, Pajama Sam, and Spy Fox.
I've seen these games, but I don't think I played them. Oh wait, I think a friend of mine in high school had one on the Wii. I think it was Pajama Sam.
And yeah, that would probably make sense.
And it's like a game where you can touch anything, and it just like does a little shtick and moves around, and you're like, okay, I gotta find stuff.
It's kind of like a point-and-click adventure
point and
type
click
thing.
games.
But especially with like brands like I remember playing Freddy Fish 3, The Case of the Stolen Conch Shell. Someone I knew when I was a kid had this game, so I would play it there. And I believe when I went to a summer camp, there was a computer lab there, and I think that was on there as well. So these are point and clicks that are pretty simple, but I think enjoyable for a time, and especially for young kids even today. I think they're still worth some interest, especially since even though Humongous Entertainment proper no longer exists, the brand itself is owned by this company Tomo, and they've been like licensing it out to things, and they've actually been involved in re-releasing, along with the help of Night Dive Studios, a good chunk of these games onto Steam.
Nice.
And I think I got all of them in a Humble Bundle pack for about $20 a few years ago.
Oh yeah, did you play them all?
I haven't played any of them yet. Maybe I will someday. But even as of the recording of this episode, pretty much all of the main Humongous Entertainment Kids games are on sale from anywhere between half to almost 3/4 off on Steam.
Well then,
they have sorry.
Well then, better get on that.
Yeah, well, they usually have a complete pack for like half off sometimes, but that's like $55. So maybe get them piecemeal, but I think definitely a lot of people would recommend to at least give something like Spy Fox a chance, and perhaps Pajama Sam. Some of them are aiming a little younger, but I think they were certainly a good gateway to go from Humongous to something like, a LucasArts point and click.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So, has anybody else come down with a case of dysentery recently?
I want to make that reference. What a shitty game. You get dysentery.
What the hell are we talking about?
We're
talking about the Oregon Trail, silly.
The Oregon Trail.
Oh, God.
The survival game. You're a pioneer, and everything's black and green, and you roam the West.
Oh,
the
okay.
United States.
Yeah.
It's sort of like how there were games like the Sierra adventure games like King's Quest or Quest for Glory, or ones like that, where you would have to type in commands for what you would do, and every choice you make or don't make has consequences.
Yeah, I'm not fond of those games. They're stressful.
Yeah. Speaking of type on command games, there was one that you and I, Josh, got addicted to in grade 5.
We've touched on this a few times before, but it's finally time for us to properly delve into the majesty that is cross-country Canada.
Oh man, I have played 3 iterations of this. Now there were I discovered the first iteration was like a Atari style graphic game where you had
DOS PC games are still pretty dope.
So you had this pixelated map of Canada. You're a truck. You didn't understand. I didn't understand the concept of like why we had to go anywhere, but for some reason, Josh, whenever we would log on to play, it always started us in somewhere on the East Coast, like St. John's, Newfoundland, or Sydney, Nova Scotia, and I said, "Hey, let's pretend that we're going back home, like to Toronto." So I would say, navigate us back to Toronto, because at the time, this actually really helped me like understand like where every city in Canada is in relation to each other, because I was just learning like the basic geography of our country like at the time. Like in grade 5 we learned about, our political system, but still I was marveling at how vast Canada really is. Like by the end of grade 4 I knew where all the provinces were, but every city in this country took some time to map out. Now I can't say much. I'm sorry to our American audience. I can't say much about Cross Country USA because there wasn't an American equivalent. But because I've road tripped across the USA, like from Canada to Florida several times, I'm very familiar with the concept of you drive through America for at least 20 hours, and it's just cities beyond cities, valleys beyond valleys, and mountains beyond mountains, and hills beyond hills. The United States of America is a gorgeous country, and so is Canada for that matter. And the first version, one of the the fun Josh and I would have back in the day was we would type it. We would, because we were punk kids. We discovered that type on command games. Like, hey Josh, type in the S word because we didn't want to say shit in class and get in trouble. It's like, Josh, type in the S word, and then like, shit, I don't understand the word shit. But for some reason, if ever we typed in, I have to go poo, it pulls up your inventory list for the supplies you're carrying in your truck for reasons I have no idea why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I always got carjacked every time I played the game.
How the hell do you get carjacked in Cross?
If you don't go to the hotel, you get carjacked because you park on the
Oh,
side because you need sleep.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, so
wow. See, it gets real.
Not only that, if your sleep meter goes down, you can crash. No, your truck will crash.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it takes money out of your budget. If you crash, it takes money out of your budget for repairs. It doesn't what was subtle is it doesn't factor in healthcare. Like, so you just assume that healthcare is free. Good job, Canada, for teaching us.
With the first Cross Country Canada, it came out in 1986. So at that time, for example, Nunavut was not a territory yet. It was still part of Northwest Territories. And especially with with a lot of these games, it did teach you about logic and rationing and strategizing because you would go basically to deliver a certain crop or good to a different part of the country. And that could take, if it was close by, wouldn't take very long. But if you had to go from one side of the country to the other, or even way out of your way, you had to figure out were you going to have enough time to get there before you missed your shipment date. And things like that. And you have to account for the weather. You need to make sure you have your chains on if it's going to be slippery on the road, or you need to make sure you have the right tires and things like that.
That's a good thing. And what the Cross Country Canada Platinum games, which were more developed with better graphics.
I remember Cross Country 2, Canada 2. I think I had that at one point.
I had both of them. And I'll never forget seeing them for sale in the Scholastic Book Fair flyers.
This is like 3 or 4 other episodes that we've come up with just in this 30 minutes.
Okay, if you're a 90s or early 2000s kid, you're going to remember, all these things. So I remember seeing Cross Country Canada Platinum, and I'm like, yeah, I got to get that. That was incredible. The other thing, but yeah, I know. What the only thing was, Iqaluit was the only city on the map that was inaccessible by road, and you couldn't actually go there. The game doesn't give you an option to fly either. It's all you're a truck driver driving a big rig across Canada, and the whole concept is you have to. But here's the thing: Iqaluit was that one city in the game's world where you ordered a lot of supplies from there. Like, if there's a certain commodity that you needed, it had to come from Iqaluit. So it would be if you ever ordered something from Iqaluit, it would be flown to. I can't remember which city it was flown to. I think it was flown to like a northern Quebec city, and then you have to go all the way to Quebec to pick it up, and then you had to take it to, let's say, Halifax. So yeah, and also it taught me that game taught me that there are some cities in Canada that you can access by ferry. Like the Victoria is on the Vancouver Island, and to get there you have to take a ferry, and also the ferry does cost money, so that factors into your travel as well. The longest ferry route also it showed. Okay, so when you're driving, it shows us when you're driving through any like route to get to anywhere in Canada, it shows like a stock forest, road graphic, or stock city road graphic, or stock residential. But the subtle thing was, when you drive, if you ever drive to Prince Edward Island and you take the route that takes you across the Confederation Bridge, that they actually created a graphic just to simulate what it's like to go on the Confederation Bridge.
Nice.
Yeah, which is really cool.
I mean, for an on-rails driving series, for the most part, once it was actually like in color and 3D and stuff, it has some pretty scenic views when they've actually coded that stuff in.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing I remember is that the Cross Country Canada Platinum games, they gave you the option to speed by clicking the gas pedal, and you can get pulled over for speeding, and to teach you that every province, penalizes speeding more harshly. If you caught speeding, sometimes the ticket will be more in other parts of the country.
Yeah, this game definitely felt real.
Yeah.
Didn't screw around.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, if you ever watched Ice Road Truckers, you could have just played this and got the same feeling.
Yeah.
Still better than those sim games I see on the PS4, like Tractor Simulator.
Oh, Farming Simulator. Euro Truck Simulator.
Horse Firefighter Simulator. It's like, man, this isn't as charming.
Nothing will beat Goat Simulator.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. So maybe we should carry forward. What's next on our list?
This one might be more of a personal pick for me, but it's more, again, in the line of things like Reader Rabbit and Living Books. It was either known as Puddle Books or part of the Fisher-Price Read and Play series, depending on when you first heard of them. But these were, again, these original stories that you could sort of like click into the book. Like you could either have one of three sort of characters read it to you, or you could speed up the speed of the narrator. You could click to go into the book, and there'd be like different sort of musical moments that you could click on. I think one of them, which was called After the Beanstalk, there was like a little game at the end, which that one was basically like Jack and the Beanstalk, but with like more of a musical aspect. But there was also some continuity in that these like little musical notes would sort of play each time you turned a page, and to where at the end of the book they'd have a whole song. And these were some of the earliest games I played when my puppy used to live in a townhouse not far from where I live now. And so that would be something I'd always look forward to going over there and playing those games. And when some of my old games got sold when I was like a kid, I think around 10 or so, when she moved to a different place, I kind of sucked. But again, these things are on the Internet Archive now, so that's cool. And especially with, again, me and finding games that have catchy opening themes. Jump into a puddle book, make a big splash, and take a look. It was one of those things that only existed in the 90s. Plus, one of them, Yolanda Yells a Lot, which is about a girl that talks really loud all the time and doesn't realize she's been talking loud all the time until the end.
Oh, wow.
There's a mini game where you can basically play as her, and you're trying to hit a ball that this boy's pitching to you with, and I'll sometimes do some like crazy dance moves or like a flip or something, and then pitch, and then you'll just hit the ball. It is obviously more like an early childhood reading type thing, but sometimes there's a little in jokes that I find hilarious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can't say I'm familiar with these games. So
with these ones, you should definitely just like probably look them up on YouTube, because obviously they are simple, but there were some nice concepts. Even one like Baxter's Birthday, where you're basically a guest at this kid Baxter's birthday party, and you have all these different activities. Near the end, one of which is actually putting a spaceship together by clicking and dragging parts, and then you like apparently go to the moon to get presents. And there's one where you're in a Wild West saloon and you're putting a bunch of different flavors of ice cream in a bowl with all these different toppings.
Oh, neat. Yeah. Sounds fun.
It's fun kid entertainment, basically, and I was a sucker for that.
I thought it was an Arthur game at first, like Buster Baxter's Birthday?
Yeah.
Oh, other kid named Buster.
Well, Arthur's Birthday as the Living Book is like the closest to that.
Yeah. Hey, I wonder if they'll ever make Buster Baxter's Birthday Blowout. If Bugs Bunny can have a birthday blowout, the other rabbit character can have a birthday blowout.
What about Ghost Buster Birthday Blowout? They take their proton packs and blow up the cake.
Word.
Sorry, I thought you were someone else.
Yeah.
That reminds me of Jimmy Neutron when he's putting all the corn into his bottomless cube, and then it overloads and explodes creamed corn everywhere.
Oh man, that brings me back.
Well, speaking of getting messy when you take chances and make mistakes.
Yeah!
Seatbelts, everyone.
Please let this be a normal field trip.
What the frizz?
The frizz?
No way!
Oh!
Now,
I already gushed over the Magic School Bus in our third episode ever.
Wow. Yeah. That takes me back even more.
We've come a long way.
But what you might not know is the book series that inspired the PBS TV show also inspired and led to a bunch of video games being made from 1994 through to around 2000-ish.
Yeah.
And and these were actually like Microsoft was actually really involved in developing and publishing these games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I really enjoyed Explores the Solar System because that was a fun way to explore the different planets, and you'd go around and do a bunch of small mini games. Basically, you would play these games to earn tokens to find clues as to where Miss Frizzle is next, because I think she was lost in space, and you have to go around the solar system to find her.
Yeah.
Good luck.
The one that was kind of weird to me was actually the next one, Explores the Human Body. That's because even though, yeah, you're inside Arnold and you have to, like, find where to go, that felt more like a bit of a basic title, but at least for me, my two favorites are Inside the Earth and in the Age of Dinosaurs.
Oh, yeah. So
I think it might have just been the visual effects for the latter, personally, that really put it over the top.
Kind of just sounds like the book series itself. Did it follow the plot of the books, or is it just like the general idea that you're reenacting?
I think it probably does follow the plot of the book very closely, but it is a more interactive version of them, especially with Inside the Earth. You're going to all these different layers of the Earth to find the different types of rocks. That's why I learned about igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic rocks.
Those are the ones.
And, I mean, Evan, I think, can attest to playing the dinosaurs one, because you were very into dinosaurs in like age 8 or 9 or something.
Yes. Yeah. Was this like the are we talking? We're not talking about the Eyewitness books, because I did have many dinosaur games.
No, but Dorothy Kindersley did make some dope educational books.
Yeah, she did. Yeah.
That's a publishing company,
yes.
Not a sentient person.
I was into quite a few educational games about dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were amazing.
Like, plus the way in the Age of Dinosaurs one, the bus would actually like do these really sort of FMV-esque animation sequences turn into like a different type of dinosaur.
Yeah. Did it turn into a Triceratops at one point? I'm pretty sure it does.
I believe so. I know there was one where it was turning into some type of, I think, a pterodactyl. Definitely a flying creature.
How is it that the bus can turn into living, inanimate, completely different vehicles and living creatures?
Evan, did you miss the part where they said it was a
magic
yeah,
bus? Yeah.
What are you, Arnold's cousin? Janet?
Janet the skeptic.
Janet the nitpicker?
Yeah.
I wish I've never played these games.
These are some of the classic examples.
Yeah.
Can't believe I never played these games. The Magic School Bus, I was all over that stuff. I loved it.
I mean, towards the end, like the bugs and the world of animals. I think the Rainforest was probably the last one I distinctly remember. But I think there was a preview on some of the earlier ones that would show some of the ones from around that time. And yeah, I mean, I gotta agree that they do follow the plot lines of the books very closely, but it does make for a little bit more immersive stuff. I mean, I wouldn't say it's grindy in the same way that some modern video games can be grindy, but especially there are some games that I will talk about later that are as, if not more challenging now than they were when I was playing them at the time.
Nice. I have a personal question. So, like, for the Deep Space one, is there a section where Arnold takes his helmet off and freezes himself?
No, we're not in Robot Chicken World.
We're not. They didn't.
Forget Robot Chicken. That happened on the show.
Yeah, that happened on the show.
Oh.
That's why I mentioned
I can't remember since it's been a while since I played it.
Yeah.
I imagine they probably cut that part out.
Yeah.
But in any case, so yeah.
Nightmare Fuel.
Evan said earlier that he remembers a certain bowling gorilla.
Yep.
So we were talking about Math Circus before, but at least for me, there was only one math game in elementary school that mattered, and that's Math Workshop.
Yes, that now it's coming back to me.
Granted, it is the 1994 re-release of it that when it went from being a Windows 3.1 game to a proper Windows 95 game where everything was in 3D. So you play as, well, I guess yourself. You put in your name. There are all these different activities ranging from stained glass windows where you color them in with certain colors, a sort of block puzzle thing where you put together different blocks and it forms like a stock image type of animation. There was one where you launch rockets. I think that's on. There were 2 floors of activities. Of course, we might as well get to the bowling gorilla, which was the highlight.
Yes.
Now, essentially, there are the 4 different suits, I guess you would call them, of math: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. And you would try and get a perfect game with all 4 of them.
Yeah, and the idea was for every math problem you solve, a bowling pin appears, and once you get all of them, it's strike-o time.
And they'd have some funny little comedic animations after the ball hits the pins.
One of my favorite ones is where like the bowling pins actually the bowling pins talk, but there's like I love how like the bowling pins will actually try and fake out the gorilla acting like there was no strike, and then the gorilla will have this stupefied look on his face, like what? And then the freaking rack machine will just plow the bowling pins away. Yeah.
There was also a really interesting one where you could actually make a song by taking different time signature pieces together, and sometimes you'd have to put them in on their own. Sometimes you'd have to cut some in half or glue some back together, or actually like put them all into a high pressure oven and bake them into a new one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because the re-release was part of this Active Mind series of Broderbund software, so it would always have that intro of the bird sort of like flying in.
Yeah.
But that was a lot of fun, and I wish I could remember some of the other games in it. But that was sort of a neat gateway into learning about different aspects of math. And in the re-release, there were 3 difficulty levels. You had the green, which was the easiest, yellow, which was like the medium, and red, which was the more difficult one. And of course, they would always harmonize when you entered certain activities with them. So it'd be like, howdy, hi, hello.
Yeah, now it's coming back to me. Yeah.
And I'm sorry if I clipped the mix there.
No worries. It's all good. Yeah. There was now how about like some of the bigger games like we were talking Disney Interactive. It was this was
I have one more before we get to the big guns.
Oh,
I know
okay.
I'm being a bit of a tease here.
No worries.
Okay.
There was one that just came back to me, which I can talk about pretty quickly. I got a game called Star Wars Math. Now this is what Star Wars Math was.
Episode 1.
Yeah, Star Wars Episode 1 Math.
Oh yeah, the job is
not Episode 9 Math.
Yeah, no, Episode 9. Like if you had traveled back into, I have to imagine if I were to travel back in time to tell my younger self in the year 2002 that
invest in Microsoft stock,
that there's going to be
or Apple stock.
There's going to be more Star Wars movies, but they may not be very.
Yeah, but let's go back to the math game because I remember this shit. Because there was the chess game with Jabba the Hutt.
It was like a Star Wars version of Chinese checkers.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And
Jabba's Game Galaxy.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
And you could shoot asteroids and do math with that.
Yeah.
That was intense.
I remember the game. My favorite game was the game with Sebulba because it is called Dueling Dice.
I didn't like that one.
You know,
I think it's because I was afraid of Sebulba.
Oh yeah, no, he was
Dueling Dice, Dungeon Dice Monsters. Dice and kids properties are getting a bad rap.
There was also Digiato with Tinto Pagli's guy. Where
I like that one. Yeah. My favorite one was Rats Race.
Rats Race, that was fun.
Was All-Star in that too?
Might as well.
Yeah. No Rats Race.
Oh, this game makes me hate sleeping in school. Ding 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 ding.
Rats Race.
That was a limited edition magnetic jigsaw puzzle if you bought it through the LucasArts company store.
Yeah. You could build your own spaceship in that game.
That was true. Awesome. Every time you win a game, you get credits, I believe, and then you take the credits to Watto Shop and you build a spaceship that can fly into orbit above Tatooine. You blast space junk and you collect credits for that too.
You gotta save up for a hyperdrive.
Does that have pod racing too?
It doesn't, surprisingly. You just go out in space and shoot asteroids.
And Anakin Skywalker isn't a character in this game.
Yeah. It's just a couple goofy aliens.
Yeah, no, it's the aliens are some of the pod racers from Episode 1.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting how we did all these 2 of the racers that are featured in this game actually die in Teemto and Rats both bite the bullet in the Phantom Menace. But Sebulba, he gets to walk away just with a grumpy face.
And Jabba
Don't
forget Jabba technically dies too later on.
Oh yeah, but but not for another 30 years.
Yeah,
but no, I got
a lot to live.
Yeah, that's true.
Living his best sluggy life.
Another thing I find funny about that, every character except Sebulba in that game eventually died. No, except Watto. We don't know what happens to Watto.
Watto.
Every character eventually dies.
Yeah.
Good moral for Star Wars.
Yeah.
But nobody's really gone. No one's really gone.
Oh God! Somehow Jabba the Hutt returned.
Return of the Jabba.
God damn it! No.
Return
Don't get any ideas.
Hutt. Once again, Return of the Hutt.
He ate himself to death.
Yeah.
Anyways, we
go from the depths of space to a certain green turtle.
Franklin?
Hey, it's Franklin. Now we talked about this in the nostalgia episode. That's one thing that Canadian children's entertainment can be proud of. Franklin, written by two Paulette Bourgeois and Brenda Clark. Very touching Canadian storybook characters.
Now Nelvana's owned by Chorus. So.
Yeah, Franklin got toys. Franklin got books. Franklin got his own show. Yeah. Franklin has some computer games. Yes, he does. Yeah.
The two in particular I'm focusing on are Franklin's Reading World, which has a variety of activities about spelling and like reading words out. And one of my favorite moments when I was a kid would always be, I believe in this, when you go to the soccer field, you could click on, I think there was a beehive, and then you would play a mini game called Bear Spelling Bee, where Franklin will now proclaim, "Hey, you found Bear Spelling Bee!" And then you'd have to click on, these bees would fly around really quickly with like letters, and you'd have to click the right ones.
Yeah.
And while that one was kind of, I liked Franklin as a kid, so the fact they sort of captured his world really well, especially because this publisher, Sanctuary Woods, I don't recall a lot of the other stuff they published, but they would also have success with perhaps my favorite of the Franklin games that have been made, Franklin Learns Math.
Oh, great.
With that classic opening jingle, there were a bunch of different mini games you'd have here. You could play marbles with Bear. You could go to the treehouse with Rabbit and do concentration. You could do sort of a paint by numbers type activity with Beaver, where like a certain math equation, like adding or subtracting, or even just the numbers by themselves, would have a color associated with it. So then you just fill it in that way. If you go to his house, you learn how to tell time with his mom, and then it sort of shows an overall timeline of his day. There is an activity with Otter where you're trying to solve math problems under the sea with like air bubbles.
Right.
And I think the last one is when you go into town with his dad and you add up change, like totals for coins, to get a surprise from a bubblegum machine.
Nice.
So it's a very small game, but just the fact that it was relatively replayable, and again the music when the jingle opens up, and so on and so forth.
I know one awful education game that I used to play a lot when I was younger. It was called M&M's The Lost Formulas.
Oh, I think it was one of those. I think I know that one.
Yeah, it's essentially a Crash Bandicoot ripoff mixed with really tacked-on math games, where you have to do these really awful like driving sections and platforms. It was the most frustrating thing I ever played, and the math did not add much to it because there would be like a middle where you have to like answer a math problem and answer it correctly, otherwise you will watch the yellow M&M die.
And they do enough of that in the commercials.
I know, but every time he died, you hear J.K. Simmons just go, "Whoops, uh-oh."
Yeah.
Whoops, uh-oh. I'm falling into a vat of chocolate. Whoops, uh-oh. You could die.
J. Jonah Jameson would never.
Oh, God.
Whoops, uh-oh.
Now, don't get Lyle started on bad games. He's our resident AVGN.
Why, because I look like the guy?
No, you look like the guy, and
I talk like the guy?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, then there's like, oh, even if you stepped on a puddle of chocolate, you would die. It was the most frustrating shit.
Well,
I hated that.
You're made of chocolate. If you step in a puddle of chocolate, you're stepping in, When you put your hand to a pile of goo that used to be a best friend's face, you'll know what to do.
It's like the chicken and the egg, you know, which came first.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no.
I remember this era only because on the cover it has all the M&M's minis, and that was when they just introduced M&M's minis, and the commercials had all of them everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty cool to hear Billy West and J.K. Simmons in a video game. But
yes.
That's
Billy West also voiced him in the commercials. I thought Brad Garrett voiced the yellow M&M in the commercials after a certain point. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's very possible, but I just know that J.K. Simmons did the voice of the yellow one. So if you ever want to play J.K. Simmons as a giant half peanut, half chocolate man, and he spins like Crash Bandicoot, he's about as brittle as a piece of china, then yeah, that's the game for you. No, I do not recommend this game. It's really bad.
Yeah.
I have SimCity here, but with SimCity, it is more on the older kid side, like preteen getting to teenagers, because that's the case of simulation games where you can create your own city, you have to build the transportation infrastructure, build the properties, and then maintain it over time. And it can get very challenging the bigger your city gets.
Yeah. I remember SimCity was popular with our friends like outside the classroom. Like that was we never played SimCity in school, but I did hear about it. I never played it myself, but I knew what it was about.
Would Roller Coaster Tycoon also count? Like, are those the kind of ideas where it's like?
I would think so in terms of business management and also, you know, well, Roller Coaster Tycoon is similar to something I'll be talking about shortly, but that's a great series just because you can make whatever kind of crazy ride ideas you want. You can set the structure of your park however you want. And then if you really want to be a dick, you can punish your guests.
You can drown people in that game, and no one will ever know. Oh, man, I love this shit, Roller Coaster Tycoon. You're right.
I don't know whether 2 or 3 is like the best one, but I think some of them are on Good Old Games, and there's a mod actually for I think 2 or 3. There's a good modding community for Roller Coaster Tycoon, and even for a game like SimCity, for example, you could go from SimCity and stuff like the Civilization series to you could trace those routes all the way to things like A-Train series, which is a popular series that originated in Japan, which is actually like a transit management game, and stuff like Mini Metro and Mini Motorways and Cities Skylines, games like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I've stalled long enough. Let's get our magic wands here. Now we will talk about some of the majesties of Disney Interactive.
I loved the Toy Story game where you just relive the movie and
the animated storybook.
Yeah, Toy Story the animated storybook. Also like Ham was kind of your guide through the whole story. And I loved the way that the computer graphics recreated some scenes from the movie. I think if I had to pick my favorite part of the game, it was where like you could click on all of Buzz's features, and that was really cool. Of course, I had a physical. I did have a Buzz Lightyear toy, and that game actually.
Me too.
No, like I would go. I remember, your Buzz Lightyear toy was like a monochrome color, and I remember.
I don't remember where we got it from, but it looked pretty cool.
Yeah, the first time I ever came to your house, that was like the first thing that I saw. Like, oh, Buzz Lightyear. Yeah, and
oh, memories.
And now they're making a fucking prequel about Buzz Lightyear.
Disney, you know what that means? You can make a new monochrome Lightyear.
Oh yeah, I know. No, there's
gold and silver.
Well, Josh, you just know that when Lightyear with Chris Evans comes out, there's going to be a whole new line of Buzz Lightyear toys. Now, do you think this movie's gonna? It feels like it's going to be like a more mature version, a more mature iteration of Buzz Lightyear of Star Command.
It's a movie? I thought it was a show.
Buzz Lightyear Star Command was a movie, and then it was a show.
Oh, the old one, yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I feel.
Buzz Lightyear Star Command the series is underrated.
Do you know what?
Nicole Sullivan.
But not to go off on a quick tangent, but I'll say one thing.
What?
Do you know what the visual the color palette of Lightyear reminded me of? It reminded me of First Man.
Yeah, it did look like First Man. You're right.
Yeah, and there's also
where he's going into space and the camera gets all really 360.
Yeah. And I also remember they have David Bowie's Starman playing in the trailer. That was good. Okay, so back to Disney Interactive. Back to the 90s.
When Disney Interactive was publishing stuff, one of my favorite series was the Magic Artist series.
Okay.
Especially the first one, that was a lot of fun just going through and creating, because it had a bunch of different backgrounds you could choose from to put your characters in. You had three different art styles, whether it was a classic black and white, a regular color, whether it was like this sort of pixie dusty, really fantasy, ultra ultra detailed style that you could go with. And I always like doing that just because even for a game from like 1996 or 7, the detail for that was pretty nice. Plus, if you moved over to the other side of like your workspace, there were these different um, there were different characters basically where you could actually learn how to draw actual Disney characters with an accompanying song to go along with it. So there was Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Goofy, Daisy, and Pluto.
Naturally.
Right.
Yeah, so for all of those, you could find something to enjoy, and then there was a re-release of that under the Magic Artist Classic banner, I think in 2001, or maybe it was a release from 1997. Then there were a few other releases in the series. Magic Artist Studio, which was more of a it was at that point it was sort of like Kid Pix. It came out in 1999. There was a bit more of a 3D emphasis, but ironically, there was also Magic Artist 3D, which really had an emphasis on doing a lot of crazy 3D stuff for at least the early 2000s. The last one was Magic Artist Deluxe, which I think at this point I had still kind of heard of the series, but I can't say for sure that I had been playing a lot of these. But I have a lot of fond memories of the first one, essentially.
Yeah.
It's one of the oldest computer games that I still have, and it's nice to look at footage of it to go back to sometimes.
Yeah.
And we were talking about Roller Coaster Tycoon before. One of my favorite series to kick back and make roller coasters and then ride them in 3D is Ultimate Ride.
Oh, cool.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
John. Also, to go on back to a similar point, Lyle, you questioned if the Tonka games are educational. I'd actually say they are because I remember getting one of those Tonka games in the cereal box.
Yeah, search and rescue.
Tonka, like where no, it puts you in like different search and rescue situations, and it's like a strategy game. Like you have to exercise like a rescue of any type of thing.
There's a little bit of like common sense
Yeah.
and like logical skills. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I thought that game was awesome. But yeah, going back to the Ultimate Ride, how did that game work?
Basically, you have a sort of blank 3D space with which you have all these different track elements. And what was neat about this series was it was actually developed by Disney Imagineering. So
Wow.
the people that are actually responsible for creating a lot of the infrastructure for Disney theme parks are working to make games where kids can actually take track parts, put them together, and either make a really crazy, unrealistic roller coaster, or in one of the later entries, Ultimate Ride Disney Coaster, they could actually take basic templates from existing roller coasters at Disney parks and sort of build on that. You could add like a different, like how there's the track and there's the stand that it goes through when you're waiting in line, that sort of hub part.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's that. And it also has a lot of physics incorporated into it because you have to make sure the coaster doesn't go too high up, otherwise it'll sort of break the plane of gravity for the space that you're in, and it can't. And you have to keep in mind that the tracks have to connect in some way. So you can't just do a loop that loops around itself. You have to get creative, and especially my introduction to that series was when I went to an overnight camp when I was 11. There was some kid that was also there, an older kid, a few years older, that was from Massachusetts, and he had somehow managed to get past this camp's firewall to actually put the game on one computer. So that computer was the busiest one of the entire year and the next year. So thank you to whoever that person was, because that's how I got into this game. I found the other ones later. Ironically, I found the first game because my ex actually had a copy, and it's the only thing I kept of that. But
oh wow,
it's nice. It was like, well, someone else actually knows about the series. Plus, there's a decently sized modding community, I think, for this series online, and even I think it might have been Ultimate Ride Coaster Deluxe, the second game in the series that I played at this overnight camp. But just the whole idea of being able to not only make these crazy coasters, but then actually like a 3D first-person view ride through them.
Yeah.
And you could put these like speed boosters, you could put tunnels, you could put a chain to guide the cars along, you could put things to slow it down, you could have crazy loops, you could have all this different. You could change the background of the space you were in. It was really neat.
It gives me like Thrillville off the rails vibes. That's pretty neat.
I'd say yeah, it's a little bit of a tamer version of Thrillville, which I have also heard of. But the only thing with this series, if you're going to try and run it on modern computers, is it does work. But obviously, with a lot of older games that are made for Windows 95/98 or earlier, it will mess up the computer's aspect ratio if you're not careful. But that's what going into the compatibility settings is for, using a virtual machine or even going through a launcher like Steam or Good Old Games' launcher, GOG Galaxy, and putting some settings in there.
Oh, I see. No, neat.
Mm-hmm.
So, are we at the finish line?
Indeed we are. And I figure if we're going to talk about educational PC games from the 90s, there's only one series that I could possibly end with. A little gem by Knowledge Adventure, the Jumpstart series.
Yay, I like these games.
They were a lot of fun. And while they did focus on a lot of different educational needs, I mean, this started in 1994 with like the kindergarten one. And at one point they went from kindergarten all the way through to 6th grade, various offshoots for things like music, art, different languages, specific ones for reading and math as well. They really covered the bases with this stuff.
Yeah, the only one I remember playing all the way through was the 3rd grade one.
Mystery Mountain is an underrated gaming gem, and I will not hear otherwise.
That game's fantastic. You play with Botley the robot, and you have to stop.
It holds up so well.
It does. I remember as a kid, I was so invested in it. I think it was one of the only games on PC I ever 100%ed and got all the robots. I didn't.
That's the thing, though. You can't just replay a game like that.
No, yeah.
Well, you can, but you have to start all over.
Yeah, and I gotta admit, it wasn't really worthwhile in the end. I just got to see Polly. Got to see Polly and her smug ass just be like,
"Oh, I got defeated by a silly robot. Way to go, guy! You got all the robots."
Like, nice. I saved them. I saved all the machines with the help of my computer, and it was all a giant sink of time that I won't get back. But I learned a lot.
But when you're 6 through 8 playing these games, it's like it might seem like a grind, but it's incredibly rewarding.
It is.
The first.
Yeah, it's a grind, but yeah, carry on.
The first game I remember playing in the series was actually the 2nd grade one because I had it as a kid, and just something about you play as this frog, or with this there's this frog character CJ and this fly with a Scottish accent named Edison, and there's these different mini games. It's like you're in a school. There are different levels in an elevator you can go to.
Yeah.
There was one activity at a football field where you had to do math as the football team was playing, so they'd go down the field and you would have to add. And much like different Jumpstart games, there are usually 3 different levels of difficulty. In the 2nd grade, there was Scout, which is the easy one. There was a different one, Explorer, which is medium, and Trailblazer is hard. There's even one where you put in exact change amounts to hear different songs, so I loved that one.
I see. So, what else could you do with the Jumpstart games?
Well, I gotta agree, the 3rd grade one is the one that I spent the most time as a kid playing.
Yeah.
That was I was learning about all this stuff that when Evan and I would be in 2nd and 3rd grade, I'm pretty sure we didn't learn a lot of what is in there.
It's kind of ironic because I hated school when I was a kid, and it wasn't until the 3rd grade that I actually took school seriously. I don't know if that was I don't know if Jumpstart was a part of that or what, but 3rd grade was definitely a memorable one.
I wanted to play a bit of the 4th grade one as a kid because it was at the first one that they did for 4th grade was called Haunted Island, and it was pretty spooky. But they got a bunch of parent complaints, and a few years later they rebranded it to something like Sapphire Falls. But
oh, really?
It's kind of interesting in that there are a few different versions, and it's kind of interesting that they actually go in some of the directions they do. With there's some activity where there's it's concentration, but you have to match an event or a term with a person. There's something that actually is pretty envelope pushing for a game aimed at 4th graders. The 5th grade one was you were playing as Joe Hammett, a kid detective who was voiced by Kat Susi. So I'm surprised they were
nice.
able to pull that. It seems interesting. I mean, obviously at this point some of the subject matter would go over my head, but I gotta appreciate the design there. And then sixth grade was like this. It was called Mission Earth Quest or something. At that point, I had never heard of it. And while the other ones were more aimed, like there were some reading and math spin-offs where it's focusing more on grammar and reading or different math-based skills. Jumpstart always had a really good way of immersing you in a story while also making you feel like you've learned something.
Yeah, no, they were fun. I loved how you could click on virtually anything in the background, and there'd always be something that would pop out, and or it would do a dance or something. It was always unexpected. It's like
No,
it's like
I
I
love this
lived it.
series so much.
Yeah, no, I wish I played more of the games. Regrettably, I only played the third one, but like you, much like you, I got a lot out of it. So
Well, again, a lot of them can be found in the Internet Archive. And the odd thing with Jumpstart in particular is that each year it seemed like they would get a new update. So, like, the discs would have the version number on them. So there'd be, like, slight differences in, like, different animations or different things that were added and removed between each one. So it's kind of a fun thing to see, like, which was where and collect them.
Yeah.
little Easter eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Eggs.
Many eggs.
Easter. I miss Easter.
It'll be
No,
Easter.
no,
It'll be
but I
Easter.
don't do anything on Easter anymore. I grew
Aw.
out of it. I don't collect chocolate eggs on Easter anymore.
Huh?
No, you go and buy them at the store.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I cut out the middleman.
Yeah.
Screw
Hey,
you, Easter Bunny.
get an egg basket and a chocolate bunny for Veronica.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will be sure to do that.
Yeah. I'll do the same for Briar.
We should probably wrap it up. Are there any other games that you recall?
That I recall, I'm I'm looking at one here that I would kind of throw into the sort of movie maker type of thing that was in Sammy Science House. That is Nickelodeon Directors Lab.
Oh, really? I never
Yeah,
heard of
you
that.
could-
I've never heard of this, and we're
It came out in
filmmakers.
the early '90s. You basically take clips, I think, from different Nickelodeon shows at the time, and you put them into the software that's in there, and you
Oh,
can
yeah?
sort of make a mini clip show. There were other sort of Nickelodeon licensed games like that, but
Wow,
same idea.
that's amazing.
Mhm.
I've never heard of
It's I
that.
think on Internet Archive as well. I
Okay.
came across Radio Disney Music Mix Studio, which is sort of the same type of idea as sort of it's essentially you have like different songs, like you can pick from a different style. There are 3 songs included in the game, and you can actually take different over 100 different loops. So you take your loop and you can sort of mix it in however which way you want. Throw your own voice in there. Make an early 2000s video to go along with it, and you could even scan in photos to like personalize it if you wanted to. Then you could save it and send it to whoever.
Oh, neat.
Trying to think of what else because I don't have. I think we pretty much covered the basics of a lot of these, and
Yeah.
especially now that the last year and a half has really given a lot of us time to reflect on things, and some of us a bit extra time to rediscover things from our youth that we either forgot that we enjoyed or that we are seeing with renewed interest or through new eyes.
Yeah, no, this was a pleasure to get through. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't familiar with all the games, but the ones I was familiar with it was a nice blast of the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing to take away from this is that the reason it's like the Internet Archive is absolutely crucial for a lot of these older games, especially as stuff doesn't get sold anymore, and especially now with modern video games, things can get delisted and removed from sales so frequently with no other way to really legally get them. So especially for older PC games and PC operating systems, Mac OS, things like that, it's really important to have these sources. So I highly recommend that if anyone listening to this was at all interested in anything we talked about today, Google some things, go on the Internet Archive and search for things and download stuff, and get into using virtual machines, a program like VMware Workstation or maybe Parallels or even Hyper-V if you're into like the vanilla Microsoft type of virtualization, because these games are out there and you can play them.
It makes me wonder, do you think the programs we grew up with as kids are still on the old computers now?
Like
I wonder if are kids still playing Sammy's Science House? I don't know. It's just
I don't think so, unless it's like a very, very old computer that is a computer history type of thing.
yeah, probably. That's
But
probably the
you know what they
case.
say, everything old is new again. So I'm sure someone could shell out money to license these things.
Yeah.
Millie's Math House remastered. Remastered.
Yeah.
Well, I
Alright.
mean, like I had said earlier, if the humongous entertainment games can be put out on Steam, and technically with Steam you can add shortcuts to games already installed on your computer and launch them through there.
Oh, true. Yeah. Well, yeah, this was a fun little walk down memory lane, Josh. Thanks for
Yeah.
reminding us of some of these games.
Like, I was kind of having flashbacks, like, just to what it was like being in the computer lab or the library at school. So, yeah,
I
no,
miss those times.
yeah, I miss those. It reminded me of what it was like to be in the library or the computer lab back in elementary school. I do miss those times.
Nothing will ever speak grade 2 than hearing all these programs running at the same time and hear all these sounds reverberating off the room in my library.
Yeah. Oh God.
Glorious.
Your school didn't have headphones, did they, Lyle?
They did, but no one used them.
Yep.
Alright. Well, thanks for joining us on So to Speak. Always learn something new each and every day.
Well, feel free to let us know if you're watching the YouTube version of this in the comments, if there's any games we missed or that you grew up with, or if you have any thoughts on any of the games we talked about. And if you're listening to the audio version of this, go find some games.
Yep.
Yeah. Play around.
Have a good night.